We're beginning the current Daf, Mesech Moed Katan Daf, begin on the second line down at the top of the Yomim, where we continue the discussion from the previous Daf regarding what's called the Kfiyas Hamita, regarding turning over the beds, which is one of the simonim of Avelis. Shiur corresponds by Kalsich and Cheskel, turning them Daf Chaim. Krishna is doing today's Daf. Some of the things we discuss in today's Daf are, like we said, Kfiyas Hamita, various halachas regarding turning over the beds, including Mavrin, as we said in the previous Daf, regarding the mourner's meal, Ha'ilech L'Beis Ha'avul, those who come to console, Mishiyatza Mipesach Beisai, whether they are overturned as soon as the nifter is removed from the house, or is it only when you have Stimas HaGoel? Mitem Yechetes HaKelim, although we have to turn over all the beds, what's the halacha regarding beds that are designated for holding utensils, and Dargish, a bed of leather. Mugmer, whether one can bring a pleasant aroma into a mourner's house. And the scheme they provide them. The Gemara goes through many different practices that they instituted regarding a mourner, not to shame the poor people. Hesped b'chol hamoyed, when hespedim are permitted on chol hamoyed, and b'chil ames medai, that a person should not cry over someone who passed away more than what's necessary. So we begin the Karam Daf Chazayin, second line down from the top of the Yomim. So we continue the theme of the Kfiyas Hamita. So when do we turn over the beds? Essentially the question is really, when does Avelis start? Because turning over the beds is one of the signs of an oval. So when do we do that? So it's machlekes. Eliezer says, the moment the dead person is taken out of the entryway of the house, then you ready to turn over the beds. Shuam, he says, no, he says, from when the casket is closed, when they finish the burial, that's when the beds are turned over. And the Gemara actually brings a story, there was a story where Malil the elder passed away. Once he was taken out from the entryway of his house, who Rabbi Eliezer had been quoted what his opinion is, so he said, turn over the beds, because he was quoted as saying that the moment the mess is taken out of the house, that's when you have to do it. Now, once the coffin was closed, so Rishuva said to them then, turn over the beds. Amalei said to him, Rishuva's opinion was Mishri Magel, but they said we already turned it over based on the elder of Rabbi Eliezer that the moment he went out of the house, we already did it. We don't have to do it now when there's Stimas HaGoel. Talking about in the Bryce now, although the beds are supposed to be turned over, upside down, however, we know on Shabbos that we don't do the Avelis B'Fehesiyah. So we learn the Bryce of Shabbos. When do we turn the beds right side up, the couches, on Erev Shabbos? So the Bryce says, from time of Mincha and onward, which Tosfos brings from the Tosfos Harab, that it was in doubt. When we say Mincha, we know there's Mincha Gedola and Mincha Ketana. Mincha Gedola is around 12:30 and Mincha Ketana is around 3:30. That is Zman Mincha, but there's two types of Mincha, so he's not clear exactly which one is it that we would say Min HaMincha Lamala. But it's sometime in the afternoon on Erev Shabbos. Now, however, Rabbi Huna is an Alpha Peking, although you're already turning the right side up on Erev Shabbos, but you don't sit on the right side of beds only until it gets dark when it's already Shabbos itself. Now, the Matzah Shabbos, after Shabbos is over, although the mourner doesn't really have to sit he has only one more day sitting on Avelis after Shabbos, still you turn it back upside down for that remaining day after Shabbos. Turn about the Brisa. Continue on this halacha. When someone turns over the bed, it's not only turning over the bed that he does, meaning the one that he sleeps on. Every single bed in his house, he turns upside down. Even if he has 10 beds in 10 different places, is cool, and all his mitos are turned upside down. And even if there's 5 brothers, one of them died, and all the brothers in their own homes, when they're sitting Shiva, they turn over their beds. Now, but if it was a bed that was designated for vessels, it's not meant for people to recline on, then such a mita, you don't have to turn upside down. So to Dargish, which the Gemara is going to shortly explain what that is, also you don't have to turn upside down, and it's like you leave it right side up. He says, no, he says Dargish, what you do is mater es kavita. You're right, although you don't turn it upside down, but what you have to do is you have to untie the straps, which are like loops, and then the bedding falls down by itself. So the Gemara says, what's my dargish? What's the dargish that we have in this machlekes about? So Amalei says it's arsa degada. It's a bed that's designated for mazel tov, like Rashi says, for good mazel. You don't use it for anything. You just designated that good heavenly divine flow should rest on that bed in the house. So Rabbi says, if that's what this dargish is, then we have the machlekes, if you leave it right side up, or you open the straps and you let the bedding fall down, so Gabi Melech. Take the case of the king. Now we're learning the Mishnah Masechet Sanhedrin that says, so when the king is sitting Shiva, Kol Am Mesub Al Haaretz, all the people, they recline on the ground, but who Mesav Al Dargish, and he's reclining on the dargish. Now, if you tell me dargish is this bed that's like no one touches, it's that ornamental piece there in the sitting room, Mika Midi, is there such a thing? Up until now, we would never have him sit on it. Now he's going to sit in it. How could it be if the dargish is just this bed of good luck that the king would be sitting on that when he's a novel? Obviously, it can't be just. It must be something that people actually use. On that, Master Rashi asks on the question. He says, "My question. What type of question is this?" Just like regarding eating and drinking. We would never give the king to eat and to drink because he doesn't take from a regular person. And but now we change it up, and we know the Aval does take food from others. So the same thing would be over here. Yes, although the dargish not usually sat on, maybe now he would. We change things up. So what's the stira to say that maybe the king would sit on this arsa degada on the bed of good luck? So the Gemara says, right, that's not a difficulty. If there is a question on that dargish can't be arsa degada, it's from the following that's not, which really a brisa that says dargish ain't tzorch l'chleisa, like we said, that the dargish does not have to be turned upside down. Rather you turn it right side up. Now, the arsa degada, if it's this bed of good luck, why don't you have to turn it upside down? Hatznan, and here it's also a brisa. If someone turns his bed upside down, let me tell you, like we said before, it's not only his bed that he turns upside down. What do you mean? Every bed in this house turns upside down. So then this bed too, if dargish is a mita, even a mita of good luck, then why are you not turning it upside down? Why keep it right side up? So the Gemara says, also here, my question, what's the difficulty? Why is it any different than the bed that doesn't have a kelim, which you also brought before? Although it's quote unquote a mita, but it's not meant for people to sit on the recliner, it's meant to put your kelim on. You don't have to turn it upside down. So that's the Arsa Digada also. It's also not meant for people to sit on. So yeah, that's why they have to turn it upside down. It's only what people use. So what's the difficulty? So the Gemara says, you're right, this question is also not a difficulty. If you're going to have a difficulty on this interpretation of what's considered this dargish, that like Ula said, it's Arsa Digada, would be from the following brayse that we quoted before. His opinion was, not like the Tanakh that held that you don't have to turn it upside down. He says, you're right, you're not turning it upside down, but dargish, what you do is matikavita, you open up the straps, and the bedding falls by itself. Now, if you think that this dargish is this bed of good luck, my karvitin isli. What type of loops does this dargish have? Like as Rashi Ksaviyat says, you're never undoing it at all. It's a permanent thing. You don't have to wash it or clean it. No one's sitting or laying on it. So why would it have any loops? From the fact that it comes with loops and straps, obviously it's something that has to be washed and cleaned, and it's not a arsa degada. So the Gemara says, you're right. Yasser Ravin and Ravin came to the bubble. One of the rabbis told him, his name was Rav Techlifa Bar Marava, he was always frequenting in the marketplace of the leather makers, and he says, I'll tell you, you know what my dargish is? It's Arsa Ditzila. It's actually a bed made out of leather. Now, it's a bed that like the nobility would carry with them when they would travel, and they would make holes in the frame, and they would hang straps. Now, also the leather, that was the bedding, that was hung on the straps, opposite the straps that were there in the loops of the frame. They wanted to fix it, so they would loop the straps, the leather straps, into the straps of the frame. And then they would stick it into the holes in the bed frame. And they wanted to undo it, they would just open up the loops, and then the leather would fall by itself. So it was a very convenient travel bed. That's what a dargish is, and therefore it makes sense why there's loops, because it's something that you would just open the loops and have the bed come down, and you just take apart the bed. That's what this dargish is, and that's something that does not have to be turned upside down. Doesn't have the kviyas of this mita. Itmar, and some take out the gears of nami, because it's not really nami. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, he says dargish Serugoi, which is its intervals, which means to say these loops, are mitaychai, are from within, meaning you put the straps from the leather that's inside the holes of the wood of the bed. In contrast to a mita, a bed, siruga al gaba. The straps are, when you take the leather and you fold it over the wood. So the darkish is going through the wood, you have a hole in the frame, and by a mita, it goes straps over. And Amr Yaakov Baracha, Amr B'Shuban Levi, says, that what you have to do is the dargish, that although you don't turn it upside down, but you do have to open up the loops and have the bedding come down. And Amr Yaakov Baracha, Amr B'Yesi, says, a mita, if you have a bed, Shanakli the naklitim are the wood that comes out by the foot and the head of the bed, where they would have these sticks standing up, and then they would put a long wood on those two sticks, and then they would put like a sheet, a canopy over it to protect from flies. If those naklitim are yotzin, if they come out, they're sticking out, so then what you do is zoikfei v'dayer. So you can keep it standing up, and that's enough. So Rashi in Ksaviyat says, because since it's not possible to turn it upside down because of the naklitin, so therefore you can't turn it upside down. Another interpretation, he says, what does it mean, zogfa v'dayi? It means to say, take away the poles and the curtains, and then you can leave it standing up, and you don't have to turn it upside down, because taking away the poles and the curtains is like the same idea as turning it upside down. So those are two interpretations regarding when you have naklitin. And that's actually what we had brought from Taisa previously. We don't do this Kirisa because, like Taisa said, for us it doesn't make a difference. Our mattress is turning upside down, right side up, it would be the same thing. So again, there are certain cases that you don't turn it upside down. That's why in practice we don't do this. Someone sleeps on a chair, on a mortar, which is that where they crush spices, and the gear says bigger than this, even if he sleeps like a karka on the ground. The Yosef Dechabas not fulfill his obligation. Why? Because Rabbi Yechon says ultimately did not fulfill the halacha of turning over the bed. You have to turn over the bed and sleep that way. You're allowed to sweep umabitz, and you're allowed to settle the dust. When in Talmudic times they used to take water and they had dust floors, they would settle it. The vase oval in the mourner's house. And a madichin karais, you could wash the plates, b'kaises in the cups, with leichis in jars, b'ketanias in the bottles, in the base oval. You're allowed to wash all these things in the mourner's house. But ve'imavin is a mugmer. Can't bring incense, v'sabasam and the spices, l'beis oval to the mourner's house. Says, is that really so? But talking about kapar, Tata Bryce says, Ema varchen. You don't make a bracha on the spices, loy on the smell, loy al mugmer, not on the incense, but something on the spices, but up in the house of the morning. Now it sounds like Baruch would do loy mavarchen. He's not going to make a blessing. Hasui ma'isa, but you could bring it. You just told me not to bring it. Says Molikash, it's not difficult. It depends where. Vitzer was saying a few interpretations, but one version is this: that's forbidden to bring it is bebeisa aval. Some say the opposite, that you can't bring it into the house of the mourner. This would say you just can't make a bracha as bebeisa menachman, is in the place where the consolers are, where the relatives are. So there you just can't make the bracha, but you can bring it. Versus by the mourners you can't even bring it. Or some say it's actually the opposite of that. Now we consider look at the next Mishnah that talks about bringing different types of food to the mourners. So how does one bring that food? So it says the Mishnah, Ein Malichin. So the consolers don't bring the meals, Lebeisa Avol, to the house of the mourner, Lebetavla, not with a tray, Belebe is Kutla, and not with a large bowl, Belebe Kanan, not with a large basket, and Lebesalam. Rather, they just bring it with a basket, and not through a distinguished vessel. As our Gemara will explain the reason, the source for that halacha. So too says the Mishnah, we don't say the blessing of the mourners, which is the suda that they make in the street. You don't make that on Chol HaMoed. Avol imdim b'shura u'menachman, but they do stand in a row, and the mourner passes through, and they console him. And then he lets the public go, and he tells them right away to those who are consoling him, go home, you celebrate your Chol HaMoed. Also, we don't place the beer, the dead person's bed when he's in the street, meaning to be masbet him, in Chol Moed. Because you don't want to get used to this being maspid. I mean, we don't want to make a long hesped. It's supposed to be very short lavaya Chol Moed. So we don't put the bed there in the street because then it's going to be margala that they can be maspid. And by women, we never put them into the street now covered because of the dignity, because they could be flowing their ziva discharge, and therefore we never have them in the street out there in the public display. Now the Gemara explains the opening halacha of our Mishnah Torah in the Braysim. Very shiny in the beginning, they would bring in the house of the mourner, Ashim, the wealthy people, would come b'klosa shal kesef v'shal zav. They would come with these baskets of gold and silver, and they would come and bring the food. It would be a whole display. Vanim, but the paupers, b'salin nitzavim, they would come with these wicker baskets shalarava klufa of peeled willow. And the poor would be embarrassed. It's a shiva house is like a social event where people are coming and bringing and ordering and the sushi and this food, whatever, and the wealthy, they come in with these beautiful baskets. And the poor people, they're coming with their wicker baskets and they're embarrassed. So this was the beginning of takanas. Hiskinu, they instituted, Shiakom Lavin, everyone has to bring Besalin Nitzarm Shalarabba Kalufa with the wicker baskets of peeled willow, because of the dignity of the poor. We don't want to differentiate. Everyone's feeling insecure and that other people come with bigger stuff. This is that source of that halacha. Similarly, we have many things like this, as the Gemara. Talking about the Braysim. But Rishonim in the beginning, I wonder when that Rishonim was. I always want to know when did they start takanas? When did it happen? But I guess it happened at some point. In the beginning, they would bring to drink in the house of the mourner, ashirim b'schus lavana. So the wealthy would come with a white glass. And the paupers would come with that dyed glass, the one you get in the Dollar Tree, there's the dyed one, that orange-looking color or whatever it is. And the poor would be embarrassed that they're coming with these inferior cups. So they instituted, everyone has to drink from these colored glass, and they because of the dignity of the poor. Similarly, in the beginning, a lot of people don't know this. We think this is a secular custom, but it seems like in the beginning they would uncover the face of the wealthy, meaning when they pass away, when they're going out to be buried, so they would have the face actually uncovered, which is like that showing, and the face of the wealthy was robust and healthy, and the mechasim pneunim, and they would cover the face of the paupers, and they show him mushcharim pneunim, because their face was blackened from famine. I mean, the poor don't get to eat. So they would cover the face. It wasn't a pretty thing to look at. Now, behind him is Baishan. The poor were embarrassed because their faces are covered. Everyone else is coming and doing the viewing of the healthy, wealthy individual. So that's where they instituted that they should cover the face of everyone who passed away, as we have our Levites, because it's all from the cover of Anim. That's why they cover the face of someone who passed away. Similarly, but it's showing in the beginning, they would take out the wealthy person in this dargish bed, and the poor, as we continue in the days, with a special, the regular bed of the dead. Now, is like a gurney or something. Now, the poor were embarrassed. So the answer that everyone should be taken out of the klicha, because of the dignity of the poor. So too, but it's showing in the beginning, they would put incense beneath those who died from intestinal illnesses, because as Rashi Ksaviyat says that the stench was very hard. It had a very bad smell. Now, now the living people who had digestive intestinal problems, they were embarrassed because they said, when they're going to die, they're going to put beneath them incense, and everyone's going to know that this guy had gastrointestinal problems, and it's embarrassing for them to see that. So they instituted that they should put beneath all of them incense because of the dignity of those who are living with intestinal illness. Again, you see how far takanas could go, how concerned Chazal were for every single individual, what their feelings are at L'Bayah. But it's showing in the beginning, They used to take and table the garments and the vessels that were touched and utilized by these women who were nidus that just passed away, because whatever they touched as they were passing away was tummy by touching them, because the nidus contaminates by just touching, whether it be of the Mekela. Now, the living women that were nidus were embarrassed because they're doing to these women what they don't do to other women who pass away. And the women who are in their state of menstruation were embarrassed. So the institute that they're going to table everything from all women, then they because the dignity of the women who are nidus that are still that are living right now.
Is the nidus that really were wearing the clothes at the time of death?
Whatever they touched.
Isn't it al stumas mess anyway? That you're toiling, and besides the point, you cannot say that were used before the one.
Well, it doesn't have to be what they were. I mean, Rashi said whatever they touched when they were tamei, they were used when they were still alive. So meaning, let's say she was in nida, let's say for the last week, right?
A week before.
Right. Whatever last week
before, she may have touched many other,
Right. So whatever she touched, right? So they're going to be tabling now because now she's nifteres, and they're tabling it when she passed away. Yeah, why'd they have to do it right now?
But then she touched a certain thing, she could have touched other cream, a cup, things like that.
It's always like that.
You never know what's, you could table it in 2 weeks from now, nobody would know.
Right, why'd they have to do it after by the Levaya?
About their own clothes, I know this was her home.
Right.
So you could say that.
Right.
But otherwise it's really...
Right, why do they have to do it by the Levaya itself, and why do people have to feel uncomfortable, and every woman who's in nida? Right. But that definitely is what they had done, and therefore they just said, okay, we're going to table everyone because of the nidus chayes. So to be in the beginning, they would table if you had a zav, a male who had his ziba discharge, and he died. So they would table his garment and his whatever he touched. But his zav the zav that was still alive were embarrassed. So they instructed that they're going to table whatever every man who passed away, because of the zav that's still alive. So to be shown in the beginning, I said it was more difficult for the relatives to actually bury the mess, meaning with expensive tachrichin, more than his death. How interesting. Until the relative would actually leave the mess and he would run away, because the levaya costed so much, because the tachrichin were so expensive, that that was more difficult for them. They were thinking like by the death, how am I going to pay for this? So they just leave the dead and just run away. The Noah Gamliel came along and he acted light-headed toward himself, and and he was taken out to be buried with simple linen garments, which, as Tais says, either he commanded this when he passed away, or he told one of his family members when he was alive. He said that this is what should be done to me. And then the people after him started accustoming themselves, no more competitions, who's doing the nicer tachrich and burial shrouds. And everyone's just going to do a simple linen garment. And Amar Rav Papa says, today, the custom of the people is afila b'tzrada. Even with canvas, bar zuzah that cost a zuz to buy, even that they use already. In other words, people already gave up this Cold War of trying to make the nicest tachrichin, and now they just take the cheapest thing and they bury the dead with that. Now I said in the Mishnah that emanichan has a mita b'rechayv. We don't on Chol Hamoed, we don't leave the mita, the dead person's beer, in the street on Chol Hamoed. Now, however, and the reason for that is because we don't want to be marach and be margul a hesped. But Amar Pape says, Ein Moed, we don't have the limitations of Chol Hamoed b'fnei Talmid Chacham, in front of a Talmudic scholar. And that's because the Talmid Chacham, you could be masped him. So Yitaka would be able to put him into the Chayiv on Chol Hamoed. Now, V'choshkin, Chanukah Purim, B'shor, Chanukah Purim, which are not as stringent as Chol Hamoed. Now, that's only if it's in front of the Talmid Chacham. But if it's not in front of him, then even though he was nifter, if you live in a different country, let's say, you cannot be masped him. Says Yomini, is that really so? But Rav Kahana safted Rav Zid Nahada. Rav Kahana eulogized Rav Zid from Nahada, meaning he was nifter in Nahada, and he eulogized him before Nara, which was very far from there. So obviously it was Shalai B'fanav, So how could he be masber mechol shemoed? Amar Papa, he says, Yom Shemua Haba. It was the day he heard about it. Ukib b'fon of dami. And that's like the equivalent of like a zivis in front of him. And therefore, he was allowed to be masbedim, but really the halacha is only for b'fon. But this was like b'fon. Amar Ula. Now the Gemara explains some terminologies regarding the hesped. It says hesped is alev, meaning to say that a person bangs opposite the heart. Like it says the pasuk in Yeshaya. Ashadayim seiftim, on the chest, they will beat. So we see that to be maspid means to say beating on the chest. Tipuach is biyad, meaning that a person bangs one hand into the other. Kilus is bedego, which he bangs his foot into the ground. So these are the body language that's done at a levaya for mourning. So in the Brisa now, hamakalis, if someone is banging his foot into the ground as a sign of mourning, like kalis besandal, shouldn't bang it with a sandal. El b'minol, rather with shoes. Nesakan, because it could be dangerous, where the sandal could turn upside down and could break his foot. So therefore, you have to be careful with what you're wearing when you're banging your foot. Hamar B'Yechanan, he says, Aval, another important halacha. If you have a mourner, once he shakes his head, where it looks like he's consoled himself, so then consolers are not allowed to sit next to him. In other words, he's done the job already, and then you have no permission to sit by him. Another teaching from Rabbi Yochanan says, everyone has to stand up in front of the leader of the Jewish people, except for a mourner, where the mourner doesn't get up when the gadol comes, and and a sick person. And Rabbi Yochanan, which Tosfos really says is an outgrowth of the previous halacha, he said, to everyone, when they stood up for the nasi, you tell them to sit down. Except for a mourner and a sick person, where, because obviously they could sit down without permission because they don't have to get up in the first place. He says, Aval Yom Rishon, a mourner on the first day, he's not allowed to eat bread from himself, which Tosfos says he already brought previously, that even if he eats many times on that first day, it doesn't say the first suda, it says that first day. So even if he eats a few meals, it can't be from his own bread. How do we know this? In fact, that Hashem said to Yecheskel, and as we brought many times in the past, Hashem Davka wanted Yecheskel not to act like a mourner. So we see what mourners are supposed to be. The opposite, that he told them, and the bread of people you should not eat, which inference is that every other mourner should be eating the bread of other people. Now, Rabbi Yisrael, what they did was machafis to decide ladadi. They didn't have people giving them a meal, so what they just did is, they says, do me a favor, your supper that your wife made, give it to me and we'll give you our meal. So he was able to eat bread that wasn't his own without putting too much strain on other people. He just switched his meals with the other one. Another teaching from Rabbi Yehuda Marab says, Meis Be'ir, if someone died in the city, Kol B'nei Ir Asurun B'Asis Malacha, everyone in the city is forbidden to do work, which this is actually the Ikra Halacha. So how do we go ahead and do work when people are passing away? The Gemara brings a story that Rav Amnun he went to the south, and Shama Kol Shipura de Shachva, he heard the sound of the shofar that someone passed away. Chazahanach Inchi, he saw those people that they were doing work. Amlo, he said to them, Lahavahanach Inchi B'Shamta, let these people be in excommunication. What? Lo Shachva Ike B'Masa, isn't someone passed away in the city? You're not supposed to do work. Amalei, they said to him, Chaburasa Ike B'Masa. This is what we call the Chevra Kadisha, the holy Chevra, which there's a chabura. But the way Rashi says it is that there's different groups. These bury their dead, and there are other groups that bury their dead, and each one has their chabura. We're not obligated in their burial because they have people taking care of them. He said to them, if that's the case, you're allowed to do work. That's because we have a Chevra Kadisha that are busy doing the work of the burial. We don't need the whole city to stop and be involved in the burial. Another teaching from Rabbi Yehuda Merav, he says, whoever takes it harder on his relative who passed away more than what's needed, then he will cry over another person who will die. As the Gemara brings a story, there's a certain woman, was the neighborhood of Ravuna. She had Baruch Hashem 7 sons. No one should ever know from this, and one of them passed away. So she was crying bitterly in excess over this child who passed away. She couldn't move on with her life. Don't do this. Ashkachabe, she didn't pay attention to him. Shalach, he sent her, eat saisis muta. If you listen, then it's okay. We love you. If you're not going to listen, then sabas avadu talidach. Do you want to have provisions for the travel for the other son? Meaning, what's provisions for the one who's dying? Meaning tachrichin? Is that what you want? So she didn't listen. The next son died. Miss Kulin, all her children passed away. At the end, he told her, prepare tachrichin for yourself, and she passed away. As the Gemara brings a pasuk in Yomי, al tifkul the don't cry for the one who died, and don't shake your head. What does that mean? Al tifkul the when it says don't cry for the mess, yosim may die more than what's necessary. But and don't shake your head to him, yosim may more than the measurement. Says the Gemara, so what's the measurement? What's the gray over here? How much is appropriate crying? So we have halacha for that. Shloisha yomim lebechi. The first 2 days is for bitter crying. The shiva lehesped, and the rest of the shiva is for lamenting. The shloishim lekir for taspires, and 30 days for the prohibition of wearing pressed clothing and for taking haircuts. That's for other relatives. Now mekama elach from that point on, Omar Kadosh Baruch Hu says, "Iyatim rachmanim bo yosim." You're not more compassionate than I am. Stop crying for something that you have to come to terms with, that this is how things are supposed to be. Now the pasuk says over there in Yomי, "Bachu bachoi lahoilach." Cry and cry for the one who leaves. So Rabbi Yehuda says that means lahoilach b'liban. When he leaves without sons, which is the Gemara brings him Shuman Leibel Azal Be'avli. He wouldn't go to the Shiva house, the house of one. El Laman the Azal Be'avli. Only if someone passed away without any children, then he would go to the house of one. So like it says in the pasuk, "Bachoi bachoi lahoilach." Cry for the one who goes. Ki lo yashav oid. He's not going to return anymore. Maras etz malata and eat and see the land of his birth. Meaning, because he doesn't have any children, that's the one, that's the one that you should cry over. That's the one that he would go to the base of. Now, a different interpretation, totally different in that same pasuk. Rav Huna says, you know what this pasuk refers to? This refers to a person who violated a sin and then he repeated it again. As Rashi says, what does it mean by lo yashav oid? It sounds like from this point onwards, he's not going to do tshuva anymore. Lo yashav oid. So if bachai, he cried and he cried, he did the sin once, he did it again? No. Then this guy's not doing tshuva anymore. This is an avera that he's going to continue to do. As the Gemara brings Rav Huna Tamei. This goes Rav Huna according to his reasoning, the Amar Rav Huna that he says elsewhere, once a person did an avera and he did it a second time, I hear this from people all the time, even the most chamadig averas, it becomes permitted to him. The Gemara says, that when you think it's not as much of him, he's not allowed to do it. I'll rather say no, nas like you had to. It became for him like as if it's mutter, and doesn't feel bad about it, doesn't even think about doing tshuva on it. Amar Levi, rounding off what we mentioned before regarding the different periods of the cycle of Avelas. So the first 3 days, as we said, that's the most intense part of the Avelas. That's why not everyone goes the first 3 days. So Yiras Atzma, a person should see himself as if he has a sword placed between his 2 shoulder blades. In other words, it's a shas hadin right now. And so they say tziduk hadin. It's like as if there's a knife between his shoulders. Now Mishleisha at Shiva, if from day 3 till day 7, kilo manachas like connected as if the sword is opposite him in the corner. After the Shiva is over, after the Shleishim is over, after the Shiva is over, is kilo is connected with shuk, as if the sword is passing opposite him in the marketplace, which Taisa says that goes all the way up until Yud Beis Chaydish, up until 12 months, and after that it's over. But that's how a person should see that the din is on him, as a way of being afraid of anything else, Chas Shalom, happening. Anytime, host.